Welcome to Put a Word on It, a podcast presented by Men of Valor. In each episode, we're going to talk with a different man, but each one with a unique journey from brokenness to freedom. I'm your host, Rudy Kalis. I spent over 40 years as a TV sportscaster, then retired and joined the Men of Valor program as a volunteer. So join the conversation. Reconciling men to God, their families, and society. Welcome to another edition of Put a Word on It, brought to you by the Lee Company. This one's kind of special for me. Tevin Peterson has been on staff here at Men of Valor for 17 years, works with these men. So I just love being around him. And yet our history goes way back. He was an intern of mine some 25 years ago. I thought he was going to be in broadcasting. Boom, it all changed. Man plans his way, Lord directs his steps. And he got a call from Kurt Campbell here at Men of Valor just at a time when he needed him the most, didn't know where he was going. He's a gracious God. It's neat to spend time with him, and he's learning another lesson in life right now through a little bit of physical pain. Here's Tevin. So when you were an intern with me for 3 years, I thought you were going to stay in broadcasting. Yeah, I thought you had a lot of potential. How did you change from that to Men of Valor?
Yeah, I think God was at work throughout that time. There was a lot of things going on in my life. I had lost my father when I was 18, so I go to college fully focused on becoming a broadcaster. I even had some friends in high school that called me Rudy because I said I wanted to be like Rudy Kalis. That was my vision. Getting in there with you, God had a different plan. I was learning about life. I was learning about becoming a man. God had put a lot of people in my life, including you, Rudy, as mentors to help me. As my father wasn't around, I needed people to help coach me through. And I don't know if you remember this, but I always was petrified of getting on the camera, and I would do okay. But you and I had a conversation about the journey of a broadcaster. And part of it for you was, I've missed some times with my daughters with volleyball. I've missed some things that, yes, I was at Super Bowls, SEC championship, but I've missed some things. And that played a part for me. I wanted to be around for my kids as much as I possibly could. That was one. And two, God was developing a passion for people, a passion that would ultimately lead me here. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was going to get in with the Navigators and do college ministry.
But prison ministry, that's a different ball game. How did that work?
It is indeed. And honestly, there was two people that God used tremendously to lead me here. One was Kurt Campbell. Kurt moved up to Nashville and wound up living with my grandparents for about 8 years. Kurt lived with my grandparents, and it was really cool. He's a songwriter, so he wrote songs about them and their love for each other. But Kurt came and spoke to my high school basketball team. And we struck up a friendship that will be a lifelong friendship. Kurt's one of my dearest friends and always will be. So I was looking to change jobs. I had left the broadcasting world and was working as a retail buyer for Shop at Home Network. And Kurt called me and began to say, I want to tell you about something. I've taken a job with a ministry called Men of Valor, and I want you to pray about joining our staff at Men of Valor. And the second was Carl was very smart. And I think Carl knew if I met Ken Leary, I'd be sold. I met Ken Leary, and there's a million great things I could say about Ken, but Ken had a passion for discipleship. We had a common bond of having been in the Navigators together. So Ken and I were two peas in a pod, and once I heard his story, and he told me about the work at Men of Valor, I knew I was leaning that way. When I met Carl, done deal. I prayed about it. Lisa and I had to pray because it was a severe shift. It was a lot of differences were going to come for us. Had never been to prison. I had never experienced addiction in terms of substance abuse or, those types of addictions, but I had experienced addiction. I think you have to develop a relationship, and that's our term that we use here for Men of Valor, and particularly Valor Ridge. When the guys come here, our thought is relational discipleship. And so we have a concept of what discipleship is, training and equipping to live out the faith. The relationship side's got to be, I got to be real and open up my chest and say, this is who I am. This is my brokenness. This is my addictions, which for me was people pleasing, wanting to have the pats on the back and people saying, "Oh, you're great, man. You're fantastic." People pleasing, perfectionism, and then just pleasure and comfort was an addiction. So there's a lot of ways I was severely addicted to things that I was not free. I was bound up. And so I think explaining that to men and telling them my story, my family, and the brokenness we have, which, is too much to cover in a short form setting, but my family had its own plenty of brokenness. And explaining my story, explaining my journey, we begin to see we're the same.
I think that's one of the best things you can do with these men is to be vulnerable. Tell them your own. Don't preach down from the mountaintop. Tell them exactly the same things that you struggle with. But I'm fascinated. Part of it is the reason we're talking is you tore your Achilles. Let me give you my scenario. I covered athletes for all those years. They disappear with maybe a torn ACL. They come back a year later. Yeah, I went through rehab. I wouldn't understand. It's like God said to me, I want you to know the pain of going through something and trying to function despite that and believing in me through it. And then you tear your Achilles. What did you learn?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Rudy. And even before this, I had a horrible bout with COVID. I ended up with pneumonia, wound up in the hospital. So this year has been the hardest year for me in my life physically, without a doubt. There's not even a close second. This has been the hardest year. So, yeah, your question, God has been the constant because with the COVID thing, my lungs got so weak, I couldn't walk to the bathroom. I had to be on oxygen for 3 weeks at my house. And just to be able to function, I could not do it. My oxygen level would drop too low. So that was a couple of months journey to get 3-4 months to get my lungs back. And then March the 5th, playing basketball, I ruptured my Achilles and literally have been on one leg since March the 5th. And it's painful. It slows you down. Everything takes 4 or 5 times longer. And so I'm learning a lot of patience, but I'm focused on enduring. How do you endure this the right way?
I think of Paul, the Apostle Paul. 3 times I asked the Lord, whatever the ailment was, to take it from me. He said, no, my strength is made perfect in weakness. When you realize that you're not Superman, I think that's endearing to the men. When they see you wheel around here the way you are, it's still steadfastly coming. Can you sense and feel that they're watching to see how you're reacting?
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's given me something else to connect with guys about. And I think that's been part of the work in my own heart is developing more compassion for people. I'd been really fortunate and blessed. I never had an injury like this, never had a surgery. So I'd been, an athlete since I was 6, 7 years old, playing all these sports and never experienced this. I remember when I first started with Men of Valor, a guy said, you either use the time or the time uses you.
Mm.
And so a guy that uses his time, as an example, Paul Hawkins is a great friend of mine. He was our first graduate from Valor Ridge, did a long sentence. Paul has grown and flourished and is someone that's going to be a friend of mine for the rest of my life. I admire how he endured. Thomas Powell did 32 years. You remember Thomas we interviewed last fall?
Love him.
Incredible story. And Thomas always had a word of wisdom for the men out here at Valor Ridge. He endured well. He really did. And so I admire guys like that. And then I want to mention one other is a young boy that my family knew. This was great friends of ours. Lisa and I had friends with Beth and Jamie Anderson, their little boy. We had sons the same age. And when Gabe Anderson, when he was 4 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer. They couldn't figure out what it was. Went down to the Mayo Clinic. It was one of the most extremely rare forms of cancer they'd ever seen. They never had seen it in anyone under 50 years old, and he was 4 years old. That his journey and his family, he's had the most amazing attitude to keep fighting, 17 years old, almost 18. He's diagnosed when he was 4. He's had countless surgeries and bone marrow transplants that didn't work and didn't take, and he's continued to fight and endure. That, to me, is a hero that continues to fight and endure and to do it well and to maintain the right attitude that you do want to be used in other people's lives. I think that's what I'm trying to do. in these two painful journeys I've had in the last 10 months.
Well, I don't think I call you a hero, but I will say that you persevered pretty well.
Not
So
at
what do
all.
you want to say, put a word on it?
Yeah, I think my word's going to be endure. For whatever reason, God led me to Hebrews 12, 1, 2, 3. It says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with endurance the race that's marked out for us, or the race that's laid before us. And then it says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful people, so that you do not grow weary and lose heart. And that's what I'd say. It's Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. It's so easy to grow weary. It's so easy. And for our folks that are listening, I think there's 3 ways you endure, and it comes from those 3 verses. The first is to fix your heart and mind on others, not yourself, to think about others and what they're going through, the trauma and the pain. Most of us don't do that. I am a self-centered person. I know I am, and that's where we focus. But to focus in on others. And secondly, I think we fix our eyes on Jesus. Jesus was the perfect model in all things. Think about this. When he was on the cross, he's hanging on the cross, his mind was on other people. He's enduring the worst physical pain and spiritual separation from God. And he said to Mary, woman, this is your son. And he said to John, this is your mother. He was focused on Mary and John. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was focused on these people that were torturing him and mocking him. That's a hero. Jesus, if anything else in my life, I want to esteem Jesus Christ and encourage people to follow him because he's better than we could ever imagine. And then the third thing is, I think we need to ask, how can I give God glory through this suffering? How can I give God glory? And it just gets my mind off of me and my pain or my frustration, focused on others, fix my eyes on Jesus. And how do I honor God through this? How can I best honor God through this?
There you go. Well, I enjoyed that. I just love seeing Tevin grow up. He looks as young as he did back then when he was a kid, but boy, he's learning from that Achilles. Don't we all learn through our pain? We either get terrible about it and let it eat us up inside, or else we grow. And that's what he's doing, realizing what it's all about. So endure. That endurance actually is the word that he said, and I like that. That's the way you have to go through life. But when you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you say, there's my Lord, there's where I'm going. Nothing stops you. And that's what's happened with Tevin, and I love seeing it in his life. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next time as we put a word on it.